How's it going? My name is Dylan and this is Dylan Talks Tone, and today we're going to talk about intonation. This is something that we can very quickly demystify for many people that have a very difficult time with it. We see it on social media all the time in various forums that people really fight with intonation. So today we're going to simplify it a little bit and show you exactly what intonation is and how we can get it right every time. Okay, so let's just talk about that real briefly. So first of all, what is intonation? Well, on a guitar, the specific application of it is that we make sure that after understanding what our scale length of the guitar is, if it's 25.5 inches, if it's 24.75, whatever the scale length is that from the nut to the 12th fret and from the 12th fret to the saddle are exactly the same length for each string. That's really all it is, okay? What this means is that to the closest extent possible, when we play two notes together on different strings, if that measurement is correct, then those two notes will theoretically be in tune with each other, okay? Now on a guitar, because of the way a guitar is made and the math that goes into it, it's never 100% correct, okay? Now open strings to 12th fret can be dead on, but between the strings and between all of our notes as we play them together in chords is not 100% correct. The reason intonation is never 100% correct on a guitar is because we have to play it, okay? So open strings can be 100% perfect, right? When we check our intonation, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. But when we play chords, wherever our fingers are, they're pulling down on the strings. And what's that's happening is it's changing the tension of each string from open, okay? And it's doing it in a different place for each chord. So when we play a particular chord formation, all the fingers are not on the same frets, okay? They're on differing frets, which means that we're changing the tension differently for each string as we fret these notes. So then we play these notes together and they can sound a little off depending on where we are on the fretboard. There's a couple of reasons for this. This is one of the reasons why we like to stay within a particular parameter for all of our other measurements, such as neck relief, height at the nut, and string height. If we get too far out into left or right field with some of these measurements, what can happen is when we fret our notes, we can pull too far down on the string, one versus the other, and we can pull our guitar out of tune essentially. So if we prefer a very high action, then we need to either at the nut, some people like a real high nut height for like slide and stuff, but see, they're not pulling down on their strings when they play slide. So in the same thing with the saddle, if we prefer a very high action on our saddles down here, then we are going to automatically, every time we play the guitar, be pulling it out of tune a little bit more, okay? So this is something that we need to think about when we're deciding how we want our guitar to play, that we set it all up how we want it first before we get to this point, because those other measurements are going to affect your final intonation. And if your stuff is so far out of whack that you can't get this right, start over, go back through your setup, and then get to this point very last, because this one, we have to get it right, otherwise we're just not going to sound right no matter how good the guitar plays, right? So, so how do we do it? Well, the way we like to do it here is, number one, know what the scale length of the guitar is. Not what it physically is on your particular guitar, but find out what the scale length of the guitar is supposed to be. Measure half the distance of that scale length from the nut to the 12th fret. Make sure it's correct, because if it's not, your nut is either worn or there's something wrong and you got to fix that first. Then measure it from the 12th fret to the saddle and make sure it's correct. Do this on your high E string, okay? Once we do that and we understand what the scale length is and we make sure that we are within adjustment range on all of our saddles, and how we do that is we back up the B string half the difference of the diameter. We back up the G string half the difference of the diameter between these two. And then typically I take the D string and I line it up with like the B, and then do the same thing with the A and the E. Back them up just a little bit. Make sure that you have the range of motion, because if you don't, then there could be other problems with your guitar. Then what we do is we take a quality tuner. Now, this could mean different things to different people, okay? We use a Peterson strobe tuner in our shop, but they're very, very expensive and most people cannot afford them. So how accurate do we need to be with a tuner? There's a lot of discussion about what you can hear, the difference in tones, semitones that you can hear between people, okay? And it's really fun, actually. Get everybody in your band or the guys that you play music with. It'd be interesting kind of education for you, that the guys that you play music with. There's a couple of websites out there, just Google it, that you'll be able to test how close of semitones you personally can hear, and see how different you are from the guys that you hear, that you play with in your band, or that you normally play with. You'll find that it varies very much from person to person. The common thing though is that most humans cannot hear, even skilled humans that play a lot, cannot hear the difference between one semitone, okay? So there's 1 cent, I'm sorry, so 1 cent. There's 100 cents in each semitone, or on a guitar it'd be each fret. So there's 100 cents between here and here, and you can't hear the difference between one. Most quality tuners that you can buy for about $50 will have a mode that makes it to where you can go down to 1/10 of a cent, okay? So most tuners that you can buy for under $100 are gonna give you plenty of accuracy for what you need. So once we have a correct tuner, once we know what our scale length is, we kind of have it roughed out by the method that we mentioned. We play the note open, okay? And then we play it at the 12th fret. Now a lot of guys will say, well, I use the harmonic at the 12th fret. I do not believe that this is, so they go like this: open fret, open string, and then harmonic at the 12th fret. I do not believe that this is 100% accurate, and here's why. You can get a fairly accurate harmonic moving your finger back and forth just a little bit. And you can change that harmonic just a touch to where it doesn't measure perfectly accurately to your tuner. The other thing is, you don't play with open strings, you play with fretted strings. So when you pull down on the string, you're changing the tension of the string. So check your intonation the way you play. That's very important. The other thing is do all of this with the guitar in playing position. We have it stood up here for purposes of the video, but do this in playing position, because the tension of the neck and your strap and everything else can have an effect on pulling on the guitar. You can actually, we all have done it, right? We've changed the tension of the strings just by pushing on the neck. So do it in playing position. All right, so we've got all those things out of the way. We're going to intonate our guitar. Open string, 12th fret. We check our tuner and we see if it's correct. And I mean correct. Right on. What if it's not correct? Which way do we go? This is the most confusing thing for many, many people, because there's lengthening and shortening and all this kind of stuff. Very, very easy. Hold the guitar in playing position. Put the tuner down in front of you. If the needle goes towards the nut, move the saddle toward the nut. If the needle goes toward the bridge, move the saddle toward the bridge. It is that simple. Retune the guitar, retune the string, check it again. If it needs to go towards the bridge, the needle will move towards the bridge. If it needs to go towards the saddle, the needle will move towards the saddle. It is that simple. On a guitar like this, there is no reason for the intonation to be off on any of the strings. It should be relatively easy to do so. On a tune-o-matic bridge, one of the hang-ups that people will get is sometimes a tech has put the bridge in backwards and maybe they can't move it enough. So sometimes that can happen. On a Telecaster where you have 3 barrel saddles instead of 6 individually adjustable saddles, sometimes you'll have to give them a little bit of a tweak. Sometimes if you cannot get your intonation correct on a Telecaster with 3 barrel saddles, sometimes that means your string height is too extreme from one to the next, typically from the B to the G, and you'll need to recheck your string height before you do that. And most of the time in a situation like that, when you can't get your intonation correct on a Telecaster with 3 barrel saddles, usually it's because you have a very small radius neck, like a 7 1/4 radius neck, and your string height is very, very high. And what happens is it puts a whole bunch of angles in the thing that make it very, very difficult to do this. So one of the things that I could suggest to you is to recheck your string height, bring your action down just a touch, and then recheck your intonation, and it will be closer, if not dead on. Many, many people will say, well, it's very impossible to get those 3 barrel saddles to intonate properly. We do it all the time. It is not impossible. It takes some fiddling, but it is not impossible. The thing about intonation is it just takes some patience. So throw on a movie, sit in your living room with your tuner, and just 1 string at a time. Open string, 12th fret. If the needle goes toward the nut, move the saddle toward the nut. If the needle goes towards the bridge, move the saddle toward the bridge. 1 string at a time, tuning in between each one to make sure that you have it correct, and your intonation will be proper. If it sounds off afterwards, that means that you have got to go back to the basics of your setup. Look at your neck relief, look at your nut height, measure your overall, your bridge, check out your saddle height, and your overall scale length. If you can't get 1 string off, 1 string perfect, it's probably because there's something wrong in those other measurements. If you do all that stuff, and this is very simple. And if you have any other questions, my name is Dylan. This has been Dylan Talks Tone, and we will help you set your intonation on your guitar. If you have any questions about it, let me know, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Have a great day.